That girl. Y'all don't know nothing about that, man. That's that Memphis 10 ripping there. Yep. Alright, that's enough of that right there. Yo, what's up? It's your brother. And hopefully your friend, Big Hill. Rockwasey in the building, Black African Power. Eat one, teach one. Look, I'm gonna make this video right quick, man, while I'm getting this truck loaded, because it's been on my mind. And I just wanted to express something right quick. Something to talk about while I'm bored here. And what it is, it's concerning groupthink. We all know what groupthink is, right? Because this just came to me the other day, you know, because I was watching something on a video when they were talking about groupthink. So my mind, you know, me being a critical thinker and analytical in the way that I think, I was trying to think of what's the largest example of a group that it has influenced. And I thought of one, man. I was like, this is the most largest example of groupthink that I can think of. And for those that don't know what groupthink is, you know, because I know most people know what groupthink is. I shouldn't even have to explain this, but it might be somebody that don't know. And what groupthink is, just a loose definition, is when you got a group of people thinking one way and then one person doesn't think that way. And he allows the group, because of maybe fear or just his unwillingness to stand on what he believes and what he thinks, he just goes along with what the group thinks. You know, it's like a psychological dynamic. You know, like if we're in a group and everybody want to go to lunch and everybody is screaming McDonald's, and I say Burger King, but yet you got 5 or 6 people screaming McDonald's, I just go along with everybody else, even though I want Burger King, right? Or you might be in a business or something, you know, when you have a business idea and when y'all sitting around brainstorming, and out of 7 people, 5 or 6 of them is thinking along the same line. And you got a totally different idea. You know what I'm saying? And you really got a conviction about your idea, but you know, you just go along with the group because you're unwilling to stand on what you really think and what you believe. That's the dynamic of group thinking. That's how it works. So, the largest example that I can think of that I would say groupthink, and this is the whole world, man, because I realized this over the last 2 or 3 years, but it's really starting to come into focus now, and I really see it. And it's people's concept of divinity. You know what I'm saying? Everybody that you ever hear, most people, if you take 10 people, I guarantee you 8 or 9 of them people, when they talk about God, they always going to express God as being an external deity, an external something other than themselves. It's like, I'm here, God there. God gonna help me do this. God gonna do this. God gonna do that. And I think since 2013 or 2014, like me being raised as a Christian, right? Of course, I had that anthropomorphized biblical concept, that biblical anthropomorphized Abrahamic concept of God. Most black folks, that's what we were raised with, right? And the only reason why we hold on to that is because we have not taken the time to study other cultures and other concepts of divinity. We just like, God is in the sky, he's a man, he's sitting on high, he's looking low, he's judging everything. That's the religious concept of God. He's separate from the creation and he judges all things. Then, so in 2014, like in 2007, I came out to church. I studied Islam for a couple of years. And then I kind of kept migrating to Africa because everything that I was studying was showing me that civilization started in Africa. So I'm like, okay, well, if civilization started in Africa, like when this happened to me, I was studying Islam. And Islam started in 670 AD. You know, Prophet Muhammad was born, I think, in 670 or 630. And then in 670, he started getting these revelations from the angel Jibril. And then, you know, 200 years later, they wrote the Quran. But anyway, so when I was studying Islam, I'm like, okay, well, if Islam got codified in the 7th century, What were they studying before then? And then at that time somebody bought me some information, man, about, and that's when I started learning about Kemet. Kemet being the first civilization, And when I started studying about how they related to divinity, they had all these deities. Ma'at, Ra, Anpu, Dehudi. But yet all these deities represented something in nature. It represented a force of nature. Even when I studied the Orishas, when I studied the Orishas in West African African spirituality, Eshu, Ogun, Oya, and all these other deities, they represented forces of energy. So at that time, I started refiguring my concept of divinity and what it actually was. Then when I started studying, a little bit about science and the universe, got into my universe studies, and I realized that everything in the human body, everything that's in the universe is in the human body. Iron, core, iron, all the nutrients, all the minerals, everything that's in the universe we have in the body. So I'm like, well, damn, we are macrocosms, we microcosms of the macrocosms. So, and then I learned the definition of words like anthropomorphic, what that means in relationship to how people worship God. You know what I'm saying? When I learned what anthropomorphism is when you take divinity and you give it the attributes of a human, like he. You know what I'm saying? And you give it human feelings, like an angry God, a jealous God. All through the Bible. You know what I'm saying? All through the Bible, the concept of God is that of a man. It's an anthropomorphic concept. So as I began to refigure my concepts of divinity, and then I started, because I'm in a fellowship, it's a spiritual fellowship, and everybody that I hear talk about God is always an external thing. It's always something separate. But to me, God is consciousness. We are the divine essence. Like even lately, like a dude, when I was talking to with this one guy, he was telling me, he said, "Oh man, you've been listening to Reverend Ike, the God Within." I'm like, nah, actually, man, I got my concept of divinity way before. I think I first heard Reverend Ike last year in 2017. I started refiguring my concept of divinity way back in 2013. And Reverend Ike said the God within. He said the God in you. I don't say the God in you. I say that we are the divine essence in the universe. Matter of fact, black people as a whole, we're a God body. They've been trying to destroy us forever, but you can't destroy a God body. You know what I'm saying? And when I think about divinity, you got men and women, you got divine masculine and divine feminine. It's religion that came along and made it a patriarchal, male-dominated. God is always a man. But if you study ancient cultures, you'll clearly see that divinity, the original Trinity, was man, woman, and child. So you can't leave the feminine out of it. And if you study the law of gender, which is a universal law, you'll see that everything in the universe is male and female. You know what I'm saying? So once you study these type of things, you can no longer subscribe to, and believe in that biblical, patriarchal, anthropomorphic concept of God. Then when it comes to group think, now all of a sudden I'm thinking outside the group, because everybody that I hear talk about God talks about him in that manner. He, she, separate from myself. And I'm like, wow. But I'm like, hey, I think about the 48 laws of power, law 38. It says, believe like you want, but when you with other people, just go along with them. You know what I'm saying? So when I talk about God, like I had a dude tell me one time, he said, man, because he knows me, right? And we've talked about this stuff. So he told me when he heard me talk about it in a meeting one time, he said, man, you really don't believe that, so why you talk about it like that? I said, dude, when I say God, I understand what my concept is, but I'm just using the language that they can understand it. So when I talk about God and it sounds like I'm talking about an external source, that's because I'm talking to a group of people that can only understand that. If I start talking about my concept of God, they're going to look at me crazy, but I understand, that my concept has nothing to do with the Bible. My concept of God is more of a universal concept. You know what I'm saying? So to me, man, that's the largest example of groupthink that I can see, is that the European conquered the world, gave everybody their concept of divinity, and now everybody that you hear talk about God and divinity, he's always going to be an external thing. And I do not believe that. You know what I'm saying? I believe that, and even when I study the Bible, I pointed this out to a dude one time. It's like in Genesis, created in his likeness, in his image, right? That's one. Think in Psalms, it said, ye are all gods, children of the Most High God. You know what I mean? Think in Luke, it says that, the kingdom of heaven is within. It ain't out there nowhere. It's within. And I'm not trying to get nobody to change their concept of God. That's just mine. That's just what I came to when I started educating myself. And like I said before, and this is what this video is about, groupthink. The largest example of groupthink that I've seen in my life thus far is how everybody in the world has this patriarchal, anthropomorphic, biblical concept of divinity. You know what I'm saying? Anybody you hear talk about God is gonna talk about it in that manner. And when I say God, I mean like the universe and the ancestors. In truth. That's the gods that if I worship, because I don't worship deities, but when I speak of God, that's what I mean, the universe. I don't mean that biblical God. I don't mean that Abrahamic God. I don't mean that anthropomorphic God. I mean the universe, and God is consciousness. Matter of fact, man, that word didn't even exist before. That the word God is a Middle Germanic word invented in the 10th century, in the 900s. Before the 900s, that word wasn't even around. So I guess since that time, well, I actually know is when the Europeans came out of the Dark Ages in the 15th century and they started conquering the world. They started whitewashing all the biblical images. They went in Africa, got all the concepts, codified, dogmatized, and gave that shit to the world by force and got everybody believing. And the thing about that is, as long as you believing in somebody else's concept of God, you can always be controlled by that person, man. But I don't want to get too deep, Yeah, that's the largest example of groupthink that I've seen thus far. The God concept. And I'm just glad, man, that I got the courage to stand on what I've come to know and understand about divinity. You know what I'm saying? Because when I hear people talk about it, I'm just like, wow. Like, well, if that's what worked for you, that worked for you, but it no longer works for me. Anyway, that's enough. I've rambled long enough. We'll get back to this right here. Peace. I'm out.
Ain't it funny how the time used to leave slips away? I'll be thinking about your sugar every moment, every day.